The USAID chases China all around the world, making sure that China doesn't monopolize contracts for critical minerals and port infrastructure all around the world.
And just like Elon Musk did not create USAID, he doesn't have the power to destroy it. And who's going to stop him? We are. We're going to stop him.
Well, the official website for USAID or USAID, also known as the US Agency for International Development, has been taken down and essentially replaced with a web page informing the agency's employees and staff that they're now on administrative leave. So here's what you'll find if you go to usaid.gov. It reads on Friday, February 7th, 2025 at 11:59 p.m. All USAID direct hire personnel will be placed on administrative leave globally, with the exception of designated personnel responsible for mission critical functions, core leadership, and specifically designated programs. So there is a lot of anger, a lot of fear in regard to the fate of this government agency. This is a federal government agency that the executive branch cannot unilaterally dismantle, since it was turned into an official government agency through Congress after it was officially or initially formed through an executive order by JFK. Now, there have been some concerns about Elon Musk's potential conflict of interest. Like, as we know, USAID has been in the crosshairs for the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, which is the unofficial, group that's led by Elon Musk. And so the concern is, well, was USAID investigating Elon Musk? And is that the reason why he's trying to dismantle it? So when those allegations came out, I took it seriously. It was reported by The Lever, and I took it seriously. I mean, that is a source that I definitely trust. But I did investigate it further, and that's actually not the case. And I want to kind of clear that up before we move on to some of the issues here. So as The Lever reports, Elon Musk's crusade to shut down the US Agency for International Development comes months after the agency announced a probe of his company's Starlink terminals, according to pages that still remain on the agency's website. But when you read the actual archived links that were included in The Lever's report, it's actually clear that the Office of the Inspector General for USAID was reviewing Ukraine's use of equipment. So just to back up a little bit. So Elon Musk's Starlink was purchased by USAID. They spent about $800,000 on it in order to provide Ukrainians internet access. That was the whole point. So let's just acknowledge $800,000 is a lot of money for a normal person, not a lot of money for Elon Musk or his Starlink business. But also USAID was not investigating Elon Musk. In fact, they were looking to investigate how Ukraine was utilizing Starlink. So let's go to the USAID Inspector General press release on this, dating back to September of 2024. They wrote that in addition to another ongoing audit on direct budget support, we are examining USAID's energy security project, USAID's oversight of Starlink satellite terminals provided to the Ukrainian government, and USAID's efforts to protect against sexual exploitation and abuse in Ukraine. An earlier press release by the Inspector General's office from May of last year sheds more light on the nature of the investigation. It says that the USAID Office of Inspector General Inspections and Evaluations Division is initiating an inspection of USAID's oversight of Starlink satellite terminals provided to the government of Ukraine. Our objectives are to determine how, one, the government of Ukraine used the USAID provided Starlink terminals, and two, USAID monitored the government of Ukraine's use of USAID provided Starlink terminals. So there wasn't an investigation into Elon Musk, and that is not something that sparked his interest in dismantling this government agency. Honestly, my read of it is Elon Musk spends way too much time on X, and everyone on the right has been saying on X that the whole point of USAID is to carry out woke policies. And so he just kind of believes it and thinks that USAID needs to be dismantled for that reason. I think that's what's motivating him. I don't think it's an effort to diminish or prevent an investigation into him. Now, let's get to some interesting waste that's been identified by reporters that I trust on USAID. Because, look, let me just be clear. There are important things that USAID does. And the whole point of the government agency is not to do good things around the world for the hell of it. Okay, the whole point is soft power. Think of soft power like the carrots, whereas military pressure is the sticks. Countries like the United States don't want to constantly use military in order to get what it wants. You use soft power, you use the carrots. So for instance, when you're doing a favor for a country, when you're providing funding for things like HIV and AIDS prevention in Africa, or treatments for infectious diseases in various countries, the United States is doing that. Those programs exist because we're hoping to get something in return. It's a way of, influencing the actions of other countries. It's soft power. I know that this is a very realist mentality in international relations, but I believe in realism. Okay, this is what it's really about. And so I think that makes sense. I would much rather use soft power as opposed to military pressure or military campaigns. But what we're noticing is there are some issues with USAID in where some of the donors to politicians would want some of these programs to be funded internationally that don't necessarily benefit the United States in any way, but it certainly benefits the donors for various politicians. Another thing that you'll notice with some of these programs is that, USAID goes back to JFK. He's the one who created it through executive order. This is a Cold War era relic, and the whole point initially was to contain communism, okay, to prevent the spread of communism globally. And you'll still see traces of that in some of the programs that are being funded now. So let's get into some of those details, okay? For instance, if you look at this piece that was recently reported by Li Fong, it's titled USAID funded censorship smears of Americans. The controversial agency provides backdoor ways for the American government to finance propaganda against American citizens. So keep in mind, USAID is funded by American citizens. So the idea that US taxpayer money is used on programs that unfairly smear Americans is outrageous. So in the piece, he writes that USAID funded a pesticide industry public relations effort known as V-Fluence, which dug up dirt about American food journalists Michael Pollan and Mark Bittman. The V-Fluence campaign sought to intimidate critics of toxic pesticides linked to cancer and other serious health issues. The effort included a database set up in concert by the industry trade group CropLife America and USAID. Now, prominent voices who were rooting for a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine were also targeted and smeared as Russian agents, and it was part of a USAID program. So while American government entities are restricted from spreading propaganda against Americans for obvious reasons, USAID actually provides a massive loophole to that. So since the funding goes to foreign entities that are free to smear American journalists all they want and politicians through their advocacy group, they go ahead and do that. There's nothing stopping them from doing that. And they're receiving American taxpayer money in order to do it. So USAID, through its contractor Internews, supports a network of social media focused news outlets, including New Voice of Ukraine, Vox Ukraine, Detector Media, and the Institute of Mass Information, Li Fong writes. These news outlets have produced a series of videos and reports targeting economist Jeffrey Sachs, commentator Tucker Carlson, journalist Glenn Greenwald, and professor John Mearsheimer as figures within a controlled network of Russian propaganda. Now, look, you might not like those people, but that doesn't matter, right? Certainly in the case of Jeffrey Sachs, Tucker Carlson, and I think John Mearsheimer, if he still lives in the United States, their tax money is going toward programs that are smearing them as Russian agents without any hard evidence because they want Russia and Ukraine to like sit together and come up with a peace deal. I think that's crazy. And keep in mind that Vox Ukraine was an official fact-checking partner for Meta. And that was, of course, before Meta decided that they're gonna now pivot to a community notes type fact-checking thing, much like what you'll experience over at X. Now, the attempt to manipulate Americans is pretty gross as well. There's evidence of that. USAID contract documents show provides special grants to Detector Media to undermine Kremlin information operations and bolster international support for solidarity with Ukraine. In 2021, Detector Media received 35.1% of its nearly $1 million budget from USAID contractor Internews. In 2023, USAID provided a $2.5 million direct grant to Detector Media. Now, again, I just want to reiterate, American taxpayer money should not fund programs that then go on to smear Americans. And there are examples of that happening. But it's also important to keep in mind that there are programs that actually do what was intended for this whole government agency to begin with, right? The whole idea is to use soft power. So when you have the programs to help people on the ground. Unfortunately, a small percentage of the money allocated to USAID every year, which is around $40 billion, goes toward those efforts. But those are the efforts that I think matter and help us maintain positive influence on countries around the world. But what's really interesting is when you listen to our Democratic lawmakers and left-wing media, they're not willing to engage in this nuance because the knee-jerk reaction is, well, Trump is doing it. So if Trump is doing it, that must mean we have to come out and we have to defend everything that USAID is doing. Keep in mind, the Trump administration can't dismantle the agency unilaterally. They can do a 90-day pause to review where the money's going, and that's what they're allegedly doing, right? But I don't think it's a good look when Democratic lawmakers right out of the gate are coming out and speaking out against that, especially when so much news is coming out now in regard to some of these programs that most Americans are not going to favor. They're not going to like. And I also find it really interesting that Democrats are focusing on defending these programs as opposed to doing fiery press conferences on how Donald Trump illegally fired a Democratic member of the National Labor Relations Board, Gwen Wilcox. We did a story on that last week. How come I'm not seeing any Democratic lawmakers protesting that? How come I'm not seeing any fiery press conferences on that? By the way, according to Foreign Policy in 2010, USAID funded a covert mission to create a Twitter-like social media platform with the expressed intention of sparking a Cuban Spring, much like the Arab Spring. And guess what? It failed miserably. Foreign Policy reported that according to an Associated Press investigation, the project ultimately failed to foment political unrest, but it did turn out to be a useful way for Havana to secretly gather intelligence on the political leanings of the 40,000 Cubans who used it. Mission accomplished. Wow, good job. There's more. A WikiLeaks cable released in 2013 outlined the US strategy for undermining Hugo Chávez's government by penetrating Chávez's political base, dividing Chavismo, and isolating Chávez internationally. The program was carried out by USAID's Office of Transition Initiatives. And so when you hear people call the government agency nothing more than a CIA slush fund, there is some truth to it. But I think that is also unfairly labeling the agency as one thing, when in reality, mixed in there, you will find programs that are good. Okay, so I want to be clear. The World Central Kitchen receives funding from USAID. I'm highly, highly supportive of that. I think that's a good thing. It provides relief to refugees. I think that's a good thing. These are programs that should remain. But again, all of these negative programs are the ones that Americans are hearing about now. And it's really important for Democrats to just take a beat and really reconsider what their messaging is going to be and what they are willing to defend. So let's go to Senator Chris Murphy, who's been on the warpath defending USAID. And he kind of told on himself and expressed the real mission of USAID while speaking to Jake Tapper on CNN. Take a look.
So Congress writes a law that dictates how USAID spends money to make sure that we're countering Chinese influence inside Africa, to make sure that we don't lose access to critical mineral supplies.
Okay, so the reason why China has influence in Africa right now, and they're working toward access to the same thing that Chris Murphy is referencing, is because they're literally building infrastructure on the ground in Africa. That's how soft power works. You think China cares about Africa? No, they care about the minerals in Africa. They want to access it for their own economic purposes. And they're not going to use military to do it. They're going to help Africa by building infrastructure. It's a give and take type situation. And what we're seeing with what USAID is doing on the ground, there's some positive stuff. Helping out with AIDS and HIV prevention, certainly. Helping prevent the spread of Ebola. That kind of stuff is great. But there needs to be an admission that, you know what, there are some areas of waste. And I want a seat at the table. I want to work with, the Republican Party, the Trump administration in rooting out the bloat, rooting out the waste, so we can keep the programs that matter. But you're not going to get any of that from Democrats. You're just going to get a blanket defense of USAID or USAID as all these negative news stories are coming out. And again, he could have very easily, in my opinion, done something different. If you want to protest the Trump administration, it's a target-rich environment. Why aren't any of the Democrats at all concerned about the fact that Trump fired that Democratic NLRB member illegally? But I guess that's not really a priority for Democrats. We're very concerned about losing working class voters, but they're just unwilling to do anything to look out for working class voters. These are the kinds of mistakes that they keep making. So obviously, we're going to find out what's going to happen after the 90 days are up. The Trump White House cannot just do away with the government agency, but it's really up to Congress to decide what they're going to do. And so as the story develops, we're going to find out if USAID will remain a government agency or if the majority of Republicans in both the House and the Senate somehow manages to rally enough support to get 60 votes in the Senate to dismantle this federal agency. We're going to wait and see, but it's important to know the nuances of the story because it's not all good, it's not all bad. What is bad, though, is when you have someone like Elon Musk who just doesn't really know much about this government agency, isn't really going through it with a fine-tooth comb, and wants to totally dismantle it based on what he's hearing about it on Twitter.
Hey, thanks for watching that video. We really appreciate it, guys. And we appreciate it if you become members because that allows us to be independent, honest, progressive, all the things that you don't get from corporate media. And all of that is because of you guys. Hit the join button below and become one of us. Become a Young Turk.